For
Commander
humanity,
Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck
this
of
was the
UES
moment we had worked
Resilience,
towards since
watching
first
the swirling
contact.
colors of
The
hyperspace
journey to the
through
council
reinforced
station had
viewport.
taken 2 weeks.
Her weathered hands
Crossing
gripped
half the
metal railing
galaxy
as she
to Mali de
contemplated the message that had arrived just
Commander,
hours
I've been
ago.
reviewing the Council's
After 3
preliminary
years of
assessment of our
diplomatic
species.
negotiations, the
I think you should
Galactic
see
Council
this.
had finally agreed to meet with Earth's representatives. For humanity,
Class D
this was the moment they
species,
had been
suitable
working
only for
towards
manual
since first
labor.
contact
They think
15
we're
years ago.
animals.
The journey to the council
Useful
station
animals,
had
but
taken 2
animals
weeks.
nonetheless.
Crossing half the galaxy in humanity's fastest ship, Sarah had used the time to review every detail of their proposal for galactic citizenship. Earth wanted nothing more than to join the cosmic community, to trade knowledge and resources, to learn from the advanced civilizations that had been traveling between stars for millennia. Dr. Marcus Webb, Earth's lead diplomat, approached her with a tablet in his hands. His face showed the strain of sleepless nights spent preparing for the negotiations. Commander, I've been reviewing the Council's preliminary assessment of our species. I think you should see this. Sarah took the tablet and read the document that had been transmitted from the Council station. Her expression darkened with each line. The assessment described humanity as primitively aggressive, technologically inferior, and culturally unstable. The report recommended that humans be classified as a Class D species, suitable only for manual labor and resource extraction under alien supervision. They think we're animals, Sarah said, her voice carrying the edge that had made her one of Earth's most respected military commanders. Useful animals, but animals nonetheless. Webb nodded grimly. The Zephyrian delegate specifically mentioned our tendency toward self-destructive conflict as evidence of our unsuitability for galactic citizenship. They've been studying our history, Sarah. Every war, every battle, every moment of violence in our past, they see it as proof that we're too dangerous and too primitive to be trusted with advanced technology. Sarah handed back the tablet and turned to look out at the stars. She thought about the men and women she had served with during the resource wars, the soldiers who had fought in the brutal conflicts that had finally united Earth under one government. The aliens saw those wars as evidence of human savagery, but Sarah knew the truth. Those conflicts had forged humanity into something stronger, something that could survive in the harsh reality of the universe. They don't understand, she said quietly. They think our history of conflict makes us weak. They don't realize it makes us survivors. The Resilience dropped out of hyperspace near the Council Station, a massive structure that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. The station was a testament to the advanced engineering of the galactic civilizations, with graceful curves and flowing designs that spoke of technology far beyond Earth's current capabilities. Dozens of alien ships moved around the station, their sleek forms making the human vessel look crude and primitive by comparison. As they approached the docking bay, Sarah studied the other ships. The Zephyrians flew vessels that looked more like works of art than military craft, with delicate crystalline structures that seemed too fragile for space travel. The Corvin ships were massive and imposing, but their design suggested they relied heavily on shields and armor rather than maneuverability. The Theshan vessels were small and fast, built for speed and efficiency rather than combat. Look at them, Sarah murmured to herself, beautiful ships. Perfect for a peaceful galaxy. But Sarah's trained eye saw something else. These ships were built by species that had known peace for so long they had forgotten how to fight. Their designs prioritized aesthetics over function, comfort over survival. They were the products of civilizations that had never faced a true existential threat. The docking procedure took nearly an hour, as the station's automated systems carefully guided the human ship into its assigned berth. Sarah and her team prepared for their first formal meeting with the Galactic Council, knowing that everything they said and did would determine humanity's future among the stars. The council chamber was a vast circular room with representatives from 17 different species, arranged in tiered seating. The humans were given a small section in the lower tier, a position that clearly indicated their status as petitioners rather than equals. Sarah took her place beside Dr. Webb, studying the alien delegates with the same intensity she had once used to assess enemy positions. High Counselor Vexehai, a tall Zephyrian with crystalline features and flowing robes, called the session to order. His voice carried an air of bored authority as he addressed the human delegation. Representatives of Earth, you have requested consideration for provisional membership in the Galactic Council. We have reviewed your species' history and current technological capabilities. While we acknowledge your recent achievements in space travel, the Council has serious concerns about your suitability for galactic citizenship. Dr. Webb stood to respond, his carefully prepared speech ready. But before he could speak, Counselor Thane, a massive Corvin with thick armor plating covering his body, interrupted. The humans are a violent species, Thane declared, his voice booming through the chamber. Their entire history is one of constant warfare and destruction. Even now, their planet bears the scars of their conflicts. They've proven themselves incapable of peaceful coexistence even among their own kind. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Sarah felt her jaw clench as she listened to the aliens discuss humanity as if they were not present. These beings, who had never known the crucible of true warfare, were judging a species that had survived by learning to fight for everything they had achieved. Counselor Zara, a delicate Thessian with large eyes and gossamer wings, spoke next. Furthermore, their technology is primitive and unstable. Their ships are crude, their weapons unsophisticated. They pose no threat to us, but they also offer nothing of value. What could such a backward species contribute to our advanced civilization? Sarah's hands clenched into fists beneath the table. She had spent 30 years in Earth's military, fighting in conflicts that had shaped the destiny of her species. She had seen friends die in battles that these comfortable aliens could never imagine, and now they sat in their safe chamber, protected by their advanced technology and peaceful alliances, dismissing humanity as worthless. Dr. Webb finally found his opportunity to speak. Honored counselors, I believe there has been a misunderstanding about human nature. Yes, we have a history of conflict, but that same history has taught us the value of cooperation and unity. The very government I represent was formed from the ashes of our last global conflict, when humanity finally learned to work together for the common good. High Counselor Vex High raised a hand to silence him. Dr. V. Webb, your intentions are admirable, but the evidence speaks for itself. Humans are a warlike species. Even your own military representative sits among you, a reminder of your violent nature. The Council has reviewed extensive data on human conflicts from your ancient tribal wars to your recent resource wars. The pattern is clear. Sarah stood slowly, her movement drawing the attention of every being in the chamber. Webb shot her a warning look, but she ignored it. She had listened to enough. With respect, High Counselor, Sarah said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded in battle. You have reviewed our history, but you have not understood it. You see our conflicts and conclude that we are violent, but you fail to see what those conflicts created. The chamber fell silent. Several alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unused to being challenged by representatives of a primitive species. Sarah continued, stepping forward into the center of the chamber. Every war we have fought has made us stronger. Every battle has taught us lessons that your peaceful species have never had to learn. You have had the luxury of advanced technology and stable alliances for millennia. You have never faced extinction. You have never been forced to adapt or die. Counselor Thane's armor plates shifted, a sign of agitation among his species. And you believe this makes you superior to us? No, Sarah replied calmly. I believe it makes us different. You see weakness where I see strength. You see violence where I see survival. You have forgotten what it means to fight for your existence because you have never truly been threatened. High Counselor Vex High's crystalline features glowed with indignation. Commander Chen, your species' tendency toward aggression is precisely why the Council cannot grant you membership. You cannot even participate in this peaceful discussion without resorting to confrontation. Sarah's smile was cold and dangerous. This isn't confrontation, Counselor. This is conversation. If you ever see true human confrontation, you'll know the difference. The threat in her words was unmistakable, and the chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Dr. Webb tugged at Sarah's sleeve, trying to get her to sit down, but she remained standing, her eyes locked on the High Counselor. Furthermore, Sarah continued, your assessment of our technology as primitive shows how little you truly understand about warfare and survival. Yes, our ships are built differently than yours. They're built to take damage and keep fighting. Our weapons are designed for effectiveness, not beauty. Everything we create has been tested in the crucible of conflict. She gestured toward the viewport that showed the elegant alien ships in the distance. Your vessels are beautiful, Counselor. Perfect works of art. But art doesn't win battles. When the time comes that you face a real enemy, an enemy that doesn't care about your advanced shields or your peaceful treaties, you'll discover the difference between building for beauty and building for war. The chamber had fallen completely silent. The alien delegate stared at Sarah with a mixture of shock and disdain, unable to comprehend the human's audacity in challenging their judgment. High Counselor Vex High stood, his tall form radiating authority and displeasure. Commander Chen, your aggressive posture and threatening words only confirm the Council's assessment. Humanity is too dangerous and unstable to be trusted with galactic citizenship. This session is concluded. As the alien delegates began to file out of the chamber, Dr. Webb turned to Sarah with exhaustion and frustration clear on his face. Sarah, what have you done? We needed their approval. Sarah watched the aliens leave, noting how they moved with the soft, careful steps of beings who had never known true hardship. Marcus, they were never going to approve us. They've already made up their minds. To them, we're useful animals at best, dangerous savages at worst. But if we had shown them we could be peaceful, we are peaceful, Sarah interrupted. We've had peace on Earth for 7 years now, but they don't want to see our capacity for peace. They only want to see our capacity for war because it makes them feel superior. Dr. Webb shook his head sadly. So what do we do now? Return to Earth and tell them we failed? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the conversation she had just witnessed. The aliens' dismissive attitude, their casual superiority, their complete failure to understand what humanity truly represented. She thought about the soldiers who had died to unite Earth, about the sacrifices that had been made to reach the stars, about the dreams of a better future that had driven humanity to seek out the galactic community. No, she said finally. We go home and we prepare. Because whether they admit us to their council or not, we're not going anywhere. And sooner or later they're going to need us. The return journey to Earth was subdued, with Dr. Webb spending most of his time preparing his report for the United Earth government. Sarah stood again at the observation viewport, watching the stars and thinking about the conversation that would soon take place in government halls across Earth. As the ship entered Earth's solar system, Sarah felt a familiar sense of homecoming. The blue planet hung before them, scarred but beautiful, a testament to humanity's resilience and determination. This was the world that had forged the human spirit in the fires of conflict and struggle. Webb joined her at the viewport as they approached their home planet. Sarah, do you really believe what you said back there? About them needing us? Sarah's reflection in the viewport showed the face of a warrior who had seen too much conflict but had never lost hope. Marcus, the galaxy has been at peace for over 1,000 years. Every species we met has known nothing but prosperity and safety. They've forgotten that the universe can be dangerous. But surely their technology is only as good as the people who use it, Sarah interrupted. And people who have never faced a real threat don't know how to respond when one finally appears. They've built a beautiful, peaceful civilization, but they've forgotten how to defend it. As the resilience entered Earth's atmosphere, Sarah made a decision that would change the course of human history. She would recommend to the United Earth government that humanity should continue developing its military capabilities, not for conquest, but for the day when the galaxy would need soldiers who knew how to fight. The Council had rejected humanity based on their perception of human weakness disguised as strength. They had failed to understand that in a universe full of potential threats, the greatest weakness was the inability to recognize and respond to danger. Sarah knew that day would come. In her experience, it always did. 5 years had passed since humanity's rejection by the Galactic Council, and Earth had not been idle. Commander Sarah Chen, now promoted to Admiral, stood in the command center of Luna Base, humanity's most advanced military installation. The moon's surface was dotted with defensive installations, shipyards, and training facilities that had transformed Earth's satellite into a fortress. The United Earth government had taken her recommendations seriously. Instead of sulking over the Council's rejection, humanity had doubled down on what they did best, preparing for war. The rejection had actually been a blessing in disguise, freeing Earth from the restrictions that Council membership would have imposed on military development. Admiral Chen reviewed the latest reports from her intelligence network. Humanity had not simply retreated to lick their wounds. They had been busy, very busy. Automated probes disguised as mining ships had been mapping the galaxy, studying alien technology, and most importantly, investigating the histories that the peaceful galactic civilizations preferred to forget. Dr. Kears Webb, now serving as Earth's Director of Xenological Studies, entered the command center with a grim expression. His diplomatic career had taken an unexpected turn after the Council rejection, leading him to become one of humanity's foremost experts on galactic threats. Sarah, you need to see this. He activated a holographic display that showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red markers indicated areas of interest, while green zones showed the current territories of Council species. What immediately caught Sarah's attention was the vast empty region beyond the galactic rim, marked with warning symbols. Our deep space probes have been investigating the outer rim territories, Webb explained. What we found explains a lot about why the Galactic Council has been able to maintain peace for so long. Sarah studied the display, her military mind immediately grasping the implications. They've been hiding behind a barrier.
Exactly.
The Council species occupy the intergalactic regions, protected by a combination of natural phenomena and ancient automated defense systems. For the past millennium, these defenses have kept out any serious external threats. Council races have lived in a bubble, protected from the harsh realities of the universe. Webb manipulated the display, zooming in on specific sectors. But our analysis suggests that the defensive grid is failing. Power sources that have operated for thousands of years are beginning to break down. The automated systems are developing glitches. And most concerning of all, we've detected signs of movement in the dark space beyond the rim. Sarah's blood ran cold as she processed this information. Movement? What kind of movement? Unknown. Whatever's out there has been contained for a very long time, but the containment is weakening. Our projections suggest that, within the next few years, the barriers will fail completely. The implications were staggering. For over 1,000 years, the galactic civilizations had enjoyed peace not because they had transcended violence, but because they had been protected from external threats by systems they no longer understood or maintained. They had grown soft and complacent, believing their own propaganda about the inherent goodness of the universe. "Have you shared this intelligence with the Galactic Council?" Sarah asked. Webb's expression grew even grimmer. "We tried. They dismissed our findings as human paranoia and warmongering. High Counselor Vexa High specifically stated that our primitive understanding of galactic security was not welcome in council discussions. They refused to even look at our evidence." Sarah turned back to the holographic display, her mind racing through tactical possibilities. The galaxy was about to face its first real threat in a millennium, and the only species that understood conflict and warfare had been excluded from the very organization that would need to coordinate the defense. What about individual species? Surely some of them must see the danger. A few lower-level officials have expressed private concerns, but they're afraid to challenge the Council's official position. The political structure of the galactic civilizations doesn't allow for rapid response to changing threats. Everything has to go through committees and subcommittees and review boards. By the time they acknowledge the danger, it may be too late. Sarah made a decision that would define humanity's role in the coming crisis. Then we prepare alone. If the galaxy won't listen to warnings, they'll have to settle for a demonstration. Over the following months, Sarah implemented a crash militarization program that made Earth's previous military buildup look modest by comparison. Shipyards worked around the clock to produce vessels designed not for exploration or peaceful trade, but for brutal, efficient warfare. The human fleet that emerged from this program bore no resemblance to the elegant ships favored by council species. Human warships were angular, armored behemoths, covered in weapon ports and defensive systems. They sacrificed aesthetic appeal for survival capability, incorporating lessons learned from centuries of human conflict. Every ship was designed to take massive damage and continue fighting with redundant systems and compartmentalized design that could function even with significant battle damage. The crews that manned these vessels were volunteers from Earth's military forces, but they represented something the galaxy had never seen. Professional soldiers whose entire culture had been shaped by warfare. These were not conscripts or militia, but career warriors who had chosen military service as their life's work. Colonel Jack Harrison, one of Sarah's most trusted officers, reported to her office with the latest training statistics. A veteran of the resource wars, Harrison had lost his left arm in the Battle of New Singapore and wore a cybernetic replacement that was far more functional than aesthetic. His scarred face and prosthetic limb made him look like something out of a nightmare to the soft council races. But to Sarah, he represented the best of humanity's warrior tradition. "Admiral, our combat readiness is at 95%, Harrison reported. The new recruits are adapting well to the enhanced training protocols. We've incorporated lessons from every major conflict in human history, plus theoretical scenarios based on our intelligence about potential threats." Sarah reviewed the training reports with satisfaction. The Galactic Council saw human military history as evidence of their savage nature, but Sarah saw it as an irreplaceable education in survival. Every battle, every war, every conflict had taught humanity something about how to fight and win against impossible odds. "What about our special projects?" she asked. Harrison's grin was predatory. "Project Prometheus is ahead of schedule. We've successfully integrated captured alien technology with human weapon systems. The results are impressive. Our new plasma cannons have 3 times the power output of equivalent council weapons, and our shield systems can absorb punishment that would cripple their ships." The integration of alien technology with human military doctrine had produced weapons that were both advanced and brutal. Where council species used their technology for exploration and peaceful purposes, humans had immediately seen its potential for warfare. A Zephyrian healing device became a weapon capable of accelerating cellular breakdown in enemy tissues. Corvin mining lasers became ship-mounted weapons of devastating power. Thessian communications technology became sophisticated electronic warfare systems. And Project Cerberus? The automated defense platforms are operational and positioned throughout the solar system. Any hostile force entering human space will face a coordinated response from over 200 defensive stations, each armed with weapons that the Council has never seen before. Sarah nodded approvingly. Earth had learned from the Galactic Defense Grid's example, but had improved upon it. The human defensive network was designed to be maintained and upgraded, not simply left to decay over centuries. More importantly, it was backed by human operators who understood warfare and could adapt to changing threats. The communication alert chimed, and Dr. Webb's face appeared on the main screen. His expression was urgent and alarmed. "Sarah, we're receiving emergency transmissions from the Galactic Rim. The barrier has failed. Something is coming through." Sarah felt a mixture of vindication and dread. She had hoped to be wrong about the impending threat, but her military instincts had been correct. What are we looking at? Unknown vessels, massive in size and completely alien in design. They're not matching any known galactic species. The automated defense platforms at the rim are engaging them, but... Webb paused, his face pale. "Sarah, they're being destroyed. These platforms have held the line for 1,000 years, and they're falling in minutes. The holographic display updated to show real-time intelligence from the outer rim." Sarah watched in grim fascination as the ancient defensive network that had protected the galaxy for millennia crumbled before an enemy that seemed almost unstoppable. The attackers moved with purpose and coordination, targeting the most critical defensive nodes with surgical precision. "Estimated time until they reach Council space?" Sarah asked. "At their current rate of advance, approximately 6 months. But Sarah, there's something else. We're detecting thousands of these ships, possibly tens of thousands. Whatever this force is, they've been building up for a very long time." Sarah studied the tactical display, her mind automatically calculating defense strategies and resource requirements. The numbers were sobering. Even if the entire Galactic Council united immediately, they lacked the military infrastructure to face a threat of this magnitude. Their peacekeeping forces were designed for internal security and dispute resolution, not massive interstellar warfare. Have they responded to any attempts at communication? Nothing. They're jamming all frequencies and destroying anything that gets close enough to attempt contact. This isn't a diplomatic mission, Sarah. This is an invasion. The implication settled over Sarah like a heavy weight. The galaxy was about to experience its first real war in over 1,000 years, and the only species with significant military experience had been rejected and dismissed by the very organization that would need to coordinate the defense. Dr. Webb, prepare a comprehensive intelligence package with everything we know about the threat. Include our analysis of galactic defensive capabilities and projected casualty estimates. Then, request an emergency meeting with the Galactic Council. Sarah, they'll never listen. After 5 years of ignoring our warnings, they'll listen now, Sarah interrupted grimly, because they don't have a choice. When you're drowning, you don't care if the person throwing you a rope was someone you previously insulted. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days later, but the atmosphere was completely different from the dignified proceeding that had rejected humanity years earlier. Panic and confusion filled the chamber as reports of the Outer Rim's collapse reached the core worlds. The elegant alien delegates who had once dismissed humanity with casual superiority now faced the prospect of an enemy they could not understand or negotiate with. High Counselor Vexai, his crystalline features dim with worry, called the emergency session to order. His previous arrogance had been replaced by barely controlled fear as he acknowledged the human delegation. "Admiral Chen, Director Webb, the Council acknowledges that your species may have relevant intelligence regarding the current crisis." Sarah stood, but this time her presence commanded respect rather than disdain. The alien delegates who had once seen her as a primitive savage now looked to her as their only hope of understanding an enemy that defied all their peaceful assumptions about the universe. "Honored counselors," Sarah began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had been proven right, "humanity offers its full military support in defending the galaxy against this threat, but we need to be clear about what we're facing and what it will require to defeat it." She activated a holographic display showing the latest intelligence from the Rim territories. "This enemy has been preparing for this invasion for centuries, possibly millennia. They know our defensive positions, our capabilities, and our weaknesses. They've watched and waited for the perfect moment to strike, and that moment is now." Counselor Thane, his armor plates rattling with anxiety, leaned forward. "Admiral Chen, our combined fleet's number in the thousands. Surely that is sufficient to repel any threat." Sarah's expression was grim as she manipulated the display to show comparative force analyses. "Counselor, your fleets are designed for peacekeeping and exploration, not warfare. Your ships are beautiful and advanced, but they're not built to survive what's coming. This enemy doesn't want to negotiate or coexist. They want to conquer and destroy. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in before continuing. However, humanity has spent the last 5 years preparing for exactly this scenario. Our fleets are smaller than yours, but they're designed for war. Our crews are trained for combat, not diplomatic missions. And our understanding of military strategy gives us advantages that numbers alone cannot provide. The chamber fell silent as the alien delegates absorbed the implications of what Sarah was saying. Their advanced civilization, their peaceful society, their sophisticated technology, none of it mattered if they couldn't use it effectively in combat. High Counselor Vexhai's voice trembled slightly as he spoke. Admiral Chen, what exactly are you proposing? Sarah's smile was cold and determined. I'm proposing that humanity take command of the galactic defense. You have the ships and resources, but you lack the experience and knowledge to use them effectively. We have the expertise to turn your peaceful fleets into weapons of war. The suggestion sent shockwaves through the chamber. The idea of placing human commanders in charge of council forces was almost unthinkable to species that had rejected humanity as too primitive for basic membership. Counselor Zara's delicate voice carried a note of desperation. But Admiral, surely our own military leaders are capable. Your military leaders have never fought a real war, Sarah interrupted bluntly. They've handled internal security and peacekeeping operations, but they have no experience with actual combat against a determined enemy. When the shooting starts, experience matters more than rank or technology. Sarah gestured to the tactical display showing the destroyed rim defenses. Those automated systems held the line for 1,000 years without human involvement. But when they faced a real enemy, they fell in days. The same thing will happen to your fleets unless you're willing to adapt and learn from those who understand warfare. The chamber erupted in heated debate as the alien delegates struggled to accept what Sarah was telling them. Their entire worldview was built on the assumption that their advanced civilization had transcended the need for military expertise. The idea that they might need help from a species they had dismissed as primitive challenged everything they believed about themselves. But as the reports from the Outer Rim continued to arrive, each one worse than the last, the reality of their situation became undeniable. The perfect, peaceful galaxy they had known for a millennium was ending, and their only hope of survival lay with the warriors they had rejected and scorned. The debate in the Galactic Council chamber had raged for 12 hours, and Admiral Sarah Chen could see the writing on the wall. Pride was a powerful force, and the alien delegates were struggling to overcome a millennium of superiority complex. While they argued about command structure and political implications, the enemy fleet continued its relentless advance toward the core worlds. High Counselor Vexhai finally called for order, his crystalline features showing the strain of the crisis. The Council has reached a decision regarding the human proposal. While we appreciate humanity's offer of assistance, the Council maintains that our own military commanders are capable of coordinating the galactic defense. We will gladly accept human ships and personnel as part of the combined fleet, but under Council authority. Sarah had expected this response, but it still frustrated her. She could see the tactical disaster unfolding before it happened, but pride and politics were preventing the aliens from making the hard choices necessary for survival. Very well, High Counselor, Sarah replied. Humanity will contribute our forces to the galactic defense under Council command. However, I must formally state for the record that this decision will result in unnecessary casualties and may ultimately lead to the fall of the core worlds. Counselor Thane's armor plates shifted defensively. Admiral Chen, our commanders have studied human military history extensively since the threat emerged. We understand your tactical principles and will incorporate them into our strategy. Sarah's expression remained neutral, but inside she was calculating how many lives this arrogance would cost. I hope you're right, Counselor. For all our sakes. The combined fleet that assembled at Kepler Station was the largest military force in galactic history. Over 3,000 ships from 17 different species converged in the staging area, their diverse designs creating a spectacular display of technological achievement. The Zephyrian vessels gleamed like jewels in the starlight, while the massive Corvin dreadnoughts projected an aura of invincible strength. Theshan ships darted between the larger vessels like schools of metallic fish. In contrast, the human contingent looked like a collection of angular predatory sharks among a school of tropical fish. The human ships were outnumbered 10-1, but their crews radiated a confidence and readiness that was noticeably different from their alien counterparts. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, her new flagship, watching the fleet preparations with professional interest. The Council had appointed Supreme Commander Veltar, a Corvin general with extensive experience in peacekeeping operations, to lead the combined force. Sarah had been assigned as a special advisor, a position that gave her access to tactical planning but no real authority. Colonel Harrison joined her at the observation port, his cybernetic arm gleaming under the ship's lights. Admiral, the Council commanders are requesting our input on the battle plan. They want to deploy the fleet in a standard defensive formation, using the larger ships as anchor points and the smaller vessels for flanking maneuvers. Sarah studied the tactical displays showing the proposed formation. It was textbook galactic military doctrine, designed for the kind of formal battles that had been fought among Council species centuries ago. Against an enemy using similar tactics, it might even be effective. But against an unknown adversary that had swept through the rim defenses like they were made of paper. What's their intelligence estimate on enemy capabilities? Sarah asked. They're working from the assumption that the attackers are using captured galactic technology, possibly an unknown species that has somehow acquired Council weapons and ships. They believe the enemy's success against the rim defenses was due to surprise and superior numbers. Sarah shook her head in frustration. The Council commanders were trying to fit the enemy into their existing understanding of warfare, creating explanations that made them feel comfortable rather than accepting the possibility that they were facing something truly alien and dangerous. Jack, prepare our ships for independent operation. I have a feeling we're going to need tactical flexibility that the main fleet won't have. The enemy fleet appeared on long-range sensors 3 days later, and Sarah immediately knew that the Council's assumptions were completely wrong. The attacking ships bore no resemblance to any known galactic design. They were organic-looking things that seemed to have been grown rather than built, with flowing curves and biomechanical features that suggested a completely different approach to technology. More disturbing was their movement pattern. Instead of the organized formations favored by Council fleets, the enemy ships moved like a living swarm, with individual vessels constantly changing position in response to some invisible coordination signal. It was like watching a flock of predatory birds preparing to attack. Supreme Commander Veltar called a meeting of senior officers to review the enemy's approach. The Corvin commander's confidence had visibly shaken when the first detailed scans came in, but he maintained his professional demeanor as he addressed the assembled leaders. Analysis confirms that we face approximately 15,000 enemy vessels of unknown design, Veltar announced. Our intelligence officers believe these ships represent a previously unknown species that has somehow acquired advanced biotechnology. The fleet will deploy according to Plan Alpha, with heavy units forming a defensive line while light cruisers attempt to disrupt their formation. Admiral Chen raised her hand to speak. Commander, have our analysts considered the possibility that this enemy has capabilities beyond our current understanding? Their success against the rim defenses suggests technology and tactics that don't match our existing models. Veltar's expression showed barely concealed irritation. Admiral Chen, while I respect humanity's military experience, we must base our strategy on verified intelligence rather than speculation. The enemy may appear formidable, but they are still bound by the same physical laws that govern all space warfare. Sarah bit back her response, knowing that arguing further would only alienate the Council commanders. She had made her concerns known. If they chose to ignore her warnings, the consequences would be on their heads. The battle began 18 hours later when the enemy fleet entered weapons range. The galactic forces opened fire with their most powerful weapons, streams of plasma and particle beams lancing out across the void toward the approaching swarm. For a moment it appeared that the defensive strategy was working, as enemy ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. But then the true nature of the threat became clear. The destroyed enemy vessels weren't individual ships at all, but rather expendable drones or scouts. The main body of the enemy fleet was still approaching, and their return fire demonstrated capabilities that sent shockwaves through the galactic command structure. The enemy weapons were unlike anything in the Council's experience. Instead of discrete energy beams or projectiles, they fired what could only be described as living ammunition. Writhing, organic projectiles that moved like serpents through space, actively seeking targets and adapting their flight paths to overcome defensive measures. The first galactic ship to be hit was the Zephyrian cruiser Lumina, one of their most advanced vessels. The organic projectile struck the ship's shields and, instead of exploding, began to spread across the defensive barrier like some kind of spaceborne plague. Within minutes, the shields collapsed and the infection spread to the ship's hull, consuming the crystalline structure from within. Panic spread through the galactic fleet as more ships fell to the horrifying weapons. The elegant vessels that had been the pride of their respective civilizations were being consumed and destroyed by an enemy that fought like nothing they had ever imagined. Supreme Commander Veltar's voice cracked over the communication network as he tried to maintain order. All units, maintain formation, and continue firing. Do not let fear compromise our tactical discipline. But discipline meant nothing when facing an enemy that didn't follow the rules of conventional warfare. The organic weapons adapted to each defensive measure, learning from every ship they destroyed and becoming more effective with each attack. The Galactic Fleet, for all its technological superiority and numerical advantage, was being systematically dismantled. Sarah watched the battle unfold from the Defiance's bridge, her military mind analyzing every exchange and drawing conclusions that filled her with dread. This wasn't just a superior enemy. This was an enemy that represented an entirely different philosophy of warfare and technology. "Admiral," Colonel Harrison reported, "we're receiving distress calls from across the fleet. The Council ships are taking massive casualties. Their weapons aren't effective against the enemy's adaptive defenses, and their own defenses can't handle the organic weapons." Sarah studied the tactical display, watching as red icons representing destroyed galactic ships multiplied across the screen. In less than 2 hours, the combined fleet had lost over 800 vessels. At this rate, the entire force would be wiped out before the day was over. "Orders, Admiral?" Harrison asked. Sarah made the decision that would define humanity's role in the war. Signal all human ships. "We're going independent. Execute Plan Omega." Plan Omega was a contingency strategy that Sarah had developed specifically for this scenario, the moment when the galactic command structure collapsed and human forces would need to act on their own initiative. It went against everything the Council had demanded, but Sarah knew that following orders in a losing battle was just another form of suicide. The human ships broke formation simultaneously, their movements coordinated by encrypted communications that the Council forces couldn't intercept. Instead of the rigid defensive line that was being systematically destroyed, the human vessels adopted a completely different tactical approach. They moved like wolves hunting in a pack, using their superior maneuverability and redundant systems to survive in the chaotic battlefield. Where the galactic ships fought like knights in formal combat, the human vessels fought like guerrilla warriors, striking hard and fast before disappearing into the confusion of battle. The difference in effectiveness was immediately apparent. While the galactic ships continued to fall to the organic weapons, the human vessels proved far more difficult to target. Their angular armored hulls resisted the spreading infection of the enemy ammunition, and their crew's combat experience allowed them to adapt quickly to the alien tactics. More importantly, the human weapons had an effect on the enemy that the galactic arsenal lacked. Where plasma beams and particle cannons had minimal impact, human kinetic weapons and modified fusion warheads actually damaged the organic enemy ships. It was as if humanity's more primitive technology was somehow better suited to fighting this particular threat. Supreme Commander Veltar's voice thundered over the communication network as he realized what was happening. "Admiral Chen, return to formation immediately. Your unauthorized actions are compromising our defensive strategy." Sarah keyed her communicator, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had just proven her point in the most decisive way possible. "Commander Veltar, there is no formation left to return to. Half your fleet is gone, and the rest will follow within the hour if we continue your strategy." The truth of her words was undeniable. As they spoke, another wave of galactic ships succumbed to the organic weapons, their elegant designs proving tragically vulnerable to an enemy that fought without honor or conventional tactics. "Admiral Chen," Veltar's voice was desperate now, "what do you recommend?" Sarah's response was immediate and uncompromising. "Full tactical control of all remaining forces, no more committee decisions, no more political considerations. If you want to save what's left of this fleet, you give me complete authority to conduct this battle as I see fit." The silence that followed stretched for long seconds as Supreme Commander Veltar weighed his options. Pride warred with survival instinct as the Corvin commander faced the hardest decision of his career. Finally, his voice came over the communicator, heavy with defeat and resignation. "Admiral Chen, you have operational command of all fleet elements. May the ancestors forgive us for what we have allowed to happen here." Sarah's assumption of command came too late to save the majority of the galactic fleet, but it marked the turning point in humanity's relationship with the galactic community. The species that had been rejected as too primitive and violent now held the fate of the galaxy in their hands. As Sarah began issuing orders to the surviving ships, reorganizing them into effective combat units and implementing tactics that had a chance of success against the alien threat, she reflected grimly on the price of the Council's pride. Thousands of ships and hundreds of thousands of lives had been lost because the galactic civilizations couldn't accept that their peaceful paradise had made them vulnerable to threats they no longer understood how to face. The real war was just beginning, and humanity would have to carry the burden of defending a galaxy that had scorned them until the moment they desperately needed salvation. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the rebuilt fleet, surrounded by holographic displays showing the tactical situation across 17 star systems. 3 weeks had passed since the disaster at Kepler Station, and the galaxy had learned a harsh lesson about the difference between peacekeeping and warfare. Of the 3,000 ships that had assembled to face the enemy, fewer than 800 remained operational. But those 800 ships were no longer the same force that had been assembled under Galactic Command. Under Sarah's direction, they had been reorganized, retrained, and equipped with weapons and tactics that actually worked against the organic enemy. The transformation had been painful and costly, but it had produced the first effective resistance the galaxy had seen since the invasion began. Colonel Harrison entered the command center with the latest casualty reports, his expression grim but determined. The cybernetic warrior had become Sarah's right hand in the massive reorganization effort, training alien crews in human combat doctrines while adapting galactic technology for actual warfare. Admiral, the Thessian Light Cruiser Squadron has completed their tactical recertification, Harrison reported. Captain Zira's people have adapted remarkably well to our engagement protocols. They're ready for independent operations. Sarah nodded approvingly. The Thessians had been among the first alien species to embrace human tactical training, their natural agility and quick reflexes making them excellent candidates for the hit-and-run tactics that were proving effective against the enemy. Unlike some of the other Council species, they had set aside their pride and focused on learning what they needed to survive. What about the Curve and Heavy units? Harrison's expression darkened slightly. More resistance there. General Thane's officers are struggling with the concept of tactical withdrawal. Now, cultural conditioning makes it almost impossible for them to accept retreat as a valid strategy, even when staying to fight means certain destruction. This was the fundamental problem Sarah faced in rebuilding the galactic defense. Each alien species brought their own cultural baggage and preconceptions about warfare that had to be overcome before they could function effectively in combat. The Zephyrians were too focused on maintaining their technological superiority to accept that sometimes brute force was more effective than elegant solutions. The Corvins equated retreat with cowardice and would rather die gloriously than live to fight another day. The Thessians were excellent at individual combat but struggled with large-scale coordination. "Set up a meeting with General Thane," Sarah ordered. "It's time for another cultural intervention." The meeting took place in the Defiance's main conference room with representatives from all the major species present. General Thane sat rigid in his chair, his massive armor plates gleaming under the artificial lights. His body language radiated barely controlled frustration at having to take orders from a species his people had dismissed as primitive just months earlier. Sarah activated the holographic display showing recent engagement data. "General, your heavy cruiser squadrons have taken 60% casualties in the last 2 weeks. At this rate, you'll have no ships left within a month." Thane's voice rumbled with suppressed anger. "Admiral Chen, my warriors die with honor, defending their positions against impossible odds. This is the Corvin way." "General, dying with honor doesn't win wars," Sarah replied bluntly. "Dead heroes don't protect civilians, and destroyed ships don't carry the fight to the enemy. Your people's courage is admirable, but courage without intelligence is just waste." The Corvin general's armor plates shifted ominously, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. Around the table, other alien officers watched the confrontation with nervous attention. Everyone understood that the success or failure of the human reorganization effort depended on getting the various species to work together effectively. Sarah continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned respect through results rather than rank. "The enemy we're facing doesn't care about honor or glory. They care about winning, and they're very good at it. Every ship they destroy makes them stronger, and every position we hold to the death gives them more resources to use against us." She manipulated the display to show tactical analyses of recent battles. "Look at these engagement records. When your ships follow human tactical protocols, when they strike hard and withdraw before the enemy can respond effectively, they inflict significant damage while taking minimal casualties. When they stand and fight according to traditional Corvin doctrine, they die gloriously and accomplish nothing." General Thane studied the data with obvious reluctance, his cultural conditioning warring with the evidence before his eyes. "Admiral, you ask us to abandon everything that makes us Corvin. Honor is not just a word to my people. It is our identity." "I'm not asking you to abandon honor," Sarah replied. "I'm asking you to redefine it. Is it more honorable to die uselessly, or to live and continue fighting to protect your people? Is it more honorable to follow traditions that guarantee defeat, or to adapt and find new ways to achieve victory?" Captain Zira, the Thessian squadron leader, spoke up from across the table. "General Thane, my people have similar concerns about adapting human tactics, but we have learned that there is honor in survival when survival serves a greater purpose." The delicate Thessian's words carried weight because her squadron had become one of the most effective units in the reformed fleet, Her ships had successfully completed 17 combat missions without a single loss, proving that human tactics could work when properly applied. Sarah seized the moment to drive her point home. General, the enemy doesn't respect your honor. They don't care about your traditions or your cultural values. They see your predictable behavior as a weakness to exploit. Every time your ships fight to the death in a hopeless position, you're giving them exactly what they want. She stood and walked to the viewport, gesturing toward the distant stars where the war was raging. Out there, right now, civilian evacuation convoys are being slaughtered because we don't have enough ships to protect them. Colony worlds are being consumed by organic weapons because we can't spare the forces for adequate defense. Every ship we lose to pointless heroics is a ship that can't save lives where it matters. The conference room fell silent as the implications of Sarah's words sank in. The war had moved far beyond military considerations. It was now a desperate struggle for the survival of galactic civilization itself. General Thane's armor plates gradually settled into a more relaxed configuration. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of grudging acceptance. Admiral Chen, my people will adapt to your tactical requirements. But I must ask that you understand the difficulty of what you request. We are being asked to abandon thousands of years of military tradition. I understand, General, Sarah replied with genuine sympathy, but understand in return that tradition is a luxury we can't afford right now. The enemy has already adapted to counter every conventional tactic in the Galactic Military Handbook. If we don't evolve, we die. The cultural transformation of the Galactic Fleet was just one aspect of the massive reorganization that Sarah had undertaken. Equally important was the technological revolution that humanity had brought to galactic warfare. The elegant weapon systems favored by Council species were being replaced by crude but effective human designs that could actually damage the organic enemy ships. Dr. Webb had been placed in charge of the Technological Integration Program, working with alien scientists to develop hybrid systems that combined galactic sophistication with human practicality. His laboratory aboard the research vessel Newton had become the focal point for the rapid development of new weapons and defensive systems. Sarah, you need to see what we've accomplished with the modified plasma systems, Webb said as she toured the laboratory facilities. By combining Zephyrian power generation with human targeting computers and Corvin armor-piercing technology, we've created weapons that are actually effective against the enemy's adaptive defenses. The new weapons were ugly by galactic standards, lacking the aesthetic appeal that alien engineers traditionally valued. But they worked, and in a war for survival, effectiveness was the only criterion that mattered. What about the organic infection problem? Sarah asked, referring to the enemy's most terrifying weapon. We've made breakthrough progress there too, Webb replied excitedly. It turns out that human medical knowledge gives us advantages that the other species lack. Our understanding of biological warfare and infectious disease has allowed us to develop countermeasures that can actually stop the spread of the enemy's organic weapons. He led her to a containment unit where samples of the enemy ammunition were being studied under strict quarantine conditions. The organic projectiles are essentially weaponized viruses, designed to convert matter into more of themselves. But they're vulnerable to the same kinds of treatments we use against biological weapons. Sarah studied the writhing samples with professional interest. Can we deploy these countermeasures fleet-wide? Already in progress. Every ship in the reformed fleet now carries biological warfare protocols based on human military medical doctrine. We're also working on offensive applications. If we can understand how these organisms work, we might be able to turn them against their creators. The transformation of the Galactic Fleet from a peacekeeping force to an effective military organization was remarkable. But Sarah knew that their current success was built on a foundation of limited resources and desperate improvisation. The enemy had only committed a fraction of their total forces to the current offensive, and intelligence reports suggested that vast reserves were still gathering beyond the galactic rim. The strategic situation remained precarious. While the reformed fleet had achieved tactical victories in several recent engagements, they were still vastly outnumbered and outgunned. Every battle was a calculated risk, and every victory came at a cost that could not be sustained indefinitely. Sarah's greatest concern was the psychological state of the galactic civilizations. The peaceful species that had dominated the galaxy for centuries were struggling to adapt to the reality of total warfare. Civilian populations were panicking as news of the invasion spread, and political leaders were demanding impossible guarantees of safety that no military force could provide. The communication alert chimed, and High Counselor Vexhi's image appeared on the main screen. The Zephyrian leader looked haggard, his crystalline features dim with exhaustion and stress. The confident politician who had dismissed humanity years earlier had been replaced by a desperate leader facing the possible extinction of his civilization. Admiral Chen, I have received reports of your latest engagement with enemy forces at the Altair system. The Council is concerned about the casualty figures among civilian populations. Sarah's expression remained neutral, but internally she bristled at the implied criticism. High Counselor, the Altair evacuation saved over 2 million lives. Without the tactical withdrawal I ordered, the entire population would have been lost. But, Admiral, the colony worlds we abandoned contained irreplaceable cultural artifacts and industrial infrastructure. The Council questions whether retreat was truly necessary. This was exactly the kind of thinking that had led to the disaster at Kepler Station. The galactic leaders still didn't understand that in total warfare, some losses were unavoidable. They wanted to save everything and everyone, which was a guarantee that they would lose everything and everyone. High Counselor, Sarah said with barely controlled patience, the enemy doesn't distinguish between military and civilian targets. They consume everything in their path. The choice is not between retreat and holding our positions. It's between orderly evacuation and complete annihilation. Vexai's image flickered as static interrupted the transmission. When it stabilized, his expression showed the strain of a leader pushed beyond his limits. Admiral, the Council recognizes your authority in military matters, but we must also consider the political implications of our strategy. If we continue to abandon territory, civilian morale will collapse. Sarah understood the political pressures that Vexai faced, but she also understood the military realities that the Council refused to accept. High Counselor, civilian morale is irrelevant if there are no civilians left alive to have morale. Every day we spend arguing about political implications is a day the enemy uses to strengthen their position. The transmission ended with Vexai's promise to consider Sarah's recommendations, which she translated as more committee meetings and bureaucratic delays while the enemy continued their relentless advance. The galactic political system was simply not designed to handle the kind of rapid decision-making that warfare required. As Sarah returned to studying the tactical displays, she reflected on the irony of her situation. Humanity had been rejected by the Galactic Council for being too warlike and aggressive. Now those same qualities were the galaxy's only hope for survival, but the peaceful civilization still couldn't fully embrace what was necessary to win. The veterans had taken command, but they were leading a coalition that was still learning how to fight a war that would determine the fate of every sentient being in the galaxy. 6 months after the disaster at Kepler Station, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the largest military gathering in galactic history. The assembly hall on Sanctuary Station contained representatives from every surviving world in Council space, along with military commanders from dozens of species that had never before cooperated on such a scale. The transformation from the elegant diplomatic chambers of the old Council to this utilitarian war room symbolized how completely the galaxy had changed. The holographic displays surrounding the assembly showed the current strategic situation with brutal clarity. Red zones marked territory lost to the enemy, amber areas indicated contested space, and the shrinking green regions showed what remained of free galactic territory. The organic invaders had consumed nearly 30% of Council space, and their advance showed no signs of slowing. But there were also new symbols on the map, blue markers indicating successful human-led operations that had not just slowed the enemy advance but actually reclaimed territory. For the first time since the invasion began, the galactic forces were winning battles and forcing the enemy to retreat. Sarah activated the central display, her voice carrying across the vast chamber with the authority that had been earned through months of successful command. Delegates, commanders, representatives of the free galaxy, we stand at a turning point in this war. 6 months ago we faced what seemed like an unstoppable enemy that threatened to consume our entire civilization. Today we have proven that they can be beaten. A murmur ran through the assembly as the display showed footage from recent battles. The organic enemy ships that had once seemed invincible were now burning wrecks drifting through space, destroyed by weapons and tactics that combined galactic technology with human military doctrine. The price of our success has been steep, Sarah continued, her expression showing the weight of command. We have lost worlds, fleets, and millions of lives. But we have also learned something that the enemy did not expect, that this galaxy contains species capable of adapting, evolving, and fighting back against any threat. General Thane rose from his position among the Corvin delegation, his massive form commanding attention. The proud warrior who had once resisted human tactical doctrine now wore the scars of a dozen battles fought according to Sarah's strategies. Admiral Chen speaks truth. My people have learned that honor lies not in dying uselessly, but in living to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Captain Zira added her voice from the Thessian section. The enemy thought they understood us, based on our peaceful nature. They learned too late that peace is not weakness, but a choice we can abandon when survival demands it. The transformation of the galactic military had been remarkable, but Sarah knew that individual battles did not win wars. The enemy still possessed overwhelming numerical superiority and was constantly adapting their tactics to counter human strategies. Victory would require something more than tactical success. It would require a fundamental shift in how the galaxy approached the conflict. Dr. Webb joined Sarah at the central podium, carrying data tablets that contained the intelligence breakthrough they had been working toward for months. Delegates, our xenobiological research teams have made a discovery that changes everything we know about our enemy. The display shifted to show detailed analyses of captured enemy technology and biological samples. The organic ships and weapons we have been fighting are not the enemy themselves. They are tools created by the real threat. The actual enemy is a collective consciousness that exists in a dimension parallel to our own, using organic technology to manifest in our reality. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. The delegates had been struggling to understand an enemy that seemed to violate every principle of known science and technology. The idea that they were fighting interdimensional invaders explained the seemingly impossible capabilities they had witnessed. Furthermore, Webb continued, this consciousness is vulnerable in ways that conventional matter-based beings are not. The organic technology it uses to interact with our reality requires a constant connection to its home dimension. If we can disrupt that connection, we can effectively cut off their ability to project power into our galaxy. Admiral Chen took over the presentation, displaying tactical projections that showed how this new intelligence could be weaponized. Based on Dr. Webb's research, we have developed a strategy that can not only defeat the current invasion, but potentially eliminate the threat permanently. The plan that Sarah outlined was audacious beyond anything previously attempted in galactic warfare. Instead of simply defending against the enemy's advance, she proposed taking the fight directly to the source of their power, the dimensional interface points that allowed the consciousness to project its organic armies into normal space. The operation will require every ship in our combined fleet, along with specialized equipment that will take months to construct, Sarah explained. We will be committing everything we have to a single massive offensive, with no reserves and no fallback positions. If we fail, the galaxy falls with us. High Counselor Vexahai, his crystalline features showing the wisdom earned through months of bitter experience, stood to address the assembly. Admiral Chen, the Council has learned to trust your judgment in military matters, but this plan asks us to gamble everything on a single throw of the dice. Sarah's response was immediate and uncompromising. High Counselor, we are already gambling everything. Every day we delay gives the enemy more time to strengthen their position and bring in additional forces. This plan offers us our only chance to end the war on terms that leave something of galactic civilization intact. She gestured toward the strategic display showing the enemy's relentless advance. The alternative is to continue fighting a defensive war against an enemy with unlimited reinforcements. We can win tactical victories, but we cannot win the war unless we strike at the source of their power. The debate that followed was intense, but brief. The delegates had learned harsh lessons about the cost of hesitation and committee-based decision-making. When the vote was called, the approval was unanimous. The galaxy would commit everything to Sarah's desperate gambit. The preparation for Operation Prometheus took 4 months of concentrated effort that pushed galactic industry beyond all previous limits. Every shipyard, every research facility, every manufacturing center was converted to military production. Species that had been trading partners for centuries shared their most closely guarded technological secrets. The peaceful galaxy that had rejected humanity for being too warlike was transforming itself into a military juggernaut. Sarah spent those months traveling between worlds, coordinating the massive effort, while also dealing with the psychological challenges facing her diverse coalition. The stress of total warfare was taking its toll on species that had never experienced such sustained conflict. On Zephyr Prime, she met with civilian leaders who were struggling to maintain public morale as the war consumed more resources and lives. The crystal cities that had been symbols of advanced civilization now served as military production centers, their elegant spires replaced by functional factories. Admiral Chen, Counselor Velhai said as they toured a weapons manufacturing facility, our people are asking how much longer this can continue. The transformation of our society has been traumatic. Sarah understood the concern. The Zephyrians had built their civilization around the pursuit of beauty and knowledge, values that were difficult to maintain when every resource was dedicated to instruments of war. Counselor, the alternative is that there will be no Zephyrian society left to preserve. Sometimes survival requires sacrificing everything you value in order to have the chance to rebuild it later. On Corva, she worked with military commanders who were planning the assault strategies for the dimensional interface points. The massive warriors had fully embraced human tactical doctrine, but they brought their own innovations to the planning process. General Thane showed her the specialized assault ships his people had designed specifically for the operation. Admiral, these vessels incorporate human design philosophy with Corvan engineering. They are not beautiful, but they will survive what we must ask them to endure. The ships were indeed ugly by galactic standards. Angular, heavily armored vessels designed to ram through enemy defenses and deliver their payloads regardless of damage sustained. They represented the complete abandonment of aesthetic considerations in favor of pure functionality. On Thessia, Sarah met with the pilots who would fly the most dangerous missions in the operation. The delicate humanoids had proven to be exceptional combat pilots, their natural agility enhanced by human training protocols and galactic technology. "Admiral," Captain Zero reported, "my squadrons are ready for the dimensional penetration missions. We understand that these are likely one-way trips." The fact that these peaceful beings were volunteering for suicide missions demonstrated how completely the war had changed the galaxy. Species that had never known conflict were now producing heroes willing to die for the chance to protect their civilizations. The final element of Operation Prometheus was the most critical and the most dangerous. Dr. Webb's research had identified the method for disrupting the dimensional interfaces, but it required a massive, coordinated assault that would push every aspect of galactic technology to its absolute limits. Sarah, Webb explained as they reviewed the final technical specifications, "We're essentially trying to collapse artificially maintained tiers in reality. The physics involved are beyond anything we've attempted before. Even with our combined knowledge, we're operating on theoretical principles that we can't fully test." Sarah studied the incomprehensible equations that filled the display screens. "Marcus, in simple terms, what are our chances of success? Honestly, I have no idea. The variables involved are too complex for accurate prediction, but I can tell you that if we do nothing, the enemy will eventually overrun everything anyway. This plan at least gives us a chance." The launch of Operation Prometheus began with the largest fleet movement in galactic history. Over 2,000 ships from 18 different species converged on the target coordinates, their diverse designs unified by a common purpose that transcended all previous alliances and rivalries. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance as the combined fleet prepared for the final assault. Around her, officers from a dozen species worked with the seamless coordination that had been forged in the crucible of shared combat. The human who had been rejected as too primitive to join galactic civilization now commanded the loyalty and respect of beings from across the galaxy. "Admiral," Colonel Harrison reported, "all fleet elements report ready for operation. Dimensional disruption devices are armed and prepared for deployment." Sarah studied the tactical display one final time, noting the positions of every ship and the timing sequences that would determine success or failure. Everything they had learned about warfare, everything they had sacrificed to reach this moment, came down to the next few hours. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Begin Operation Prometheus." The battle that followed defied every previous understanding of space combat. The enemy responded to the massive assault with desperate fury, throwing everything they had at the approaching galactic fleet. Organic weapons that could consume matter itself filled space with deadly infection, while strange vessels that seemed to exist partially outside normal reality phased in and out of the battle, but the galactic forces had learned to fight this enemy on their own terms. Human-designed weapons that could affect dimensional boundaries carved through enemy defenses, while coordinated tactics developed through months of bitter experience allowed the diverse fleet to function as a single devastating weapon. The moment of truth came when the dimensional disruption devices reached their target coordinates. The weapons that Dr. Webb had designed based on humanity's understanding of physics and warfare activated simultaneously, sending cascading resonance waves through the fabric of reality itself. For a terrifying moment, nothing seemed to happen. The enemy continued their attack with undiminished fury, and several galactic ships were consumed by organic weapons. Sarah began to fear that their desperate gambit had failed. Then reality itself seemed to convulse. The dimensional interfaces that had allowed the consciousness to project its power began to collapse, severing the connection between the enemy's home dimension and normal space. Across the battlefield, organic ships simply ceased to exist as their dimensional tethers were cut. The victory was total and decisive. Without their connection to the consciousness, the organic invasion force crumbled like a house of cards. The threat that had consumed 30% of the galaxy was eliminated in a matter of minutes. As the galactic fleet regrouped and began damage assessment, Admiral Sarah Chen reflected on the transformation that had taken place. The peaceful species that had once rejected humanity for being too warlike had learned to fight with a determination and effectiveness that surprised even her. "Admiral," Dr. Webb's voice came over the communication system. "Preliminary analysis suggests that the dimensional barriers are stabilizing. The threat appears to be permanently eliminated." Sarah nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. "Marcus, prepare a comprehensive report on everything we've learned during this conflict. The galaxy has changed, and we need to understand what that means for the future. The war was over, but its consequences would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come." The peaceful species had learned that survival sometimes required the capacity for violence, while humanity had proven that their warlike nature could be channeled toward protecting rather than conquering. As the fleet began the long journey home, Sarah knew that the galaxy would never again make the mistake of dismissing any species as too primitive or too dangerous. The veterans had fired back, and in doing so, they had saved not just themselves, but an entire civilization that had finally learned the true meaning of strength.